Arteta! What a strike! What a screamer! Zola! And a fantastic goal! Arsenal back in it! And here's Limpar, lines it up, finds the net. Arsenal in front.
Scintillating Arsenal performance smites the Orcs and leaves them dangling above the fires of Mount Doom. This is the Arsenal Vision post-match podcast. My name is Elliot Smith, and you can block me on Twitter at Yankee Gunner. That's right, those damned Orcs are going into the fire where they belong, just a whisker away from relegation, where we shall never have to see them or hear from them again, except when there's some story in the newspaper about inbreeding and the problems it produces in society. But other than that, we will never have to hear from them again, hear their ugly songs about Aaron Ramsey walking with a limp, or see any of their cuntish players or their cuntish fans, or just the general cuntiness about them will be gone forever from our lives. And that is a good thing. Another good thing is that we have a full house today. We have the entire panel. We have everyone bar Scott, and I wish Scott could be here, but he can't for reasons that have nothing to do with Scott and everything to do with me. But Tim is here. You can find him on Twitter at Stilberto. Hello, Tim.
Hello there.
Paul's on Twitter at Paz in My Pants. Hello, Paz.
Hello.
We're going to do that? Is that a thing we're going to do?
Maybe.
We never agreed to that. And Clive's on Twitter at ClivePAFC. Hello, Clive.
Hello, hello.
Hello, indeed. Clive, we will look forward to getting your thoughts on Aaron Ramsey later in the podcast. But let's start with you, Tim, just really quickly. So the world's smartest journalist, I will not name him because I don't want to upset or offend anybody or lead any of you to feel that you are being roped into abusing a journalist. I am perfectly content to do so. Expressed his outrage that people would stay away from this match, this scintillating, basically preseason friendly style match on the cherished Easter holiday. So I'm curious to get your just quick take on what the crowd looked like, if you want to put crowd in air quotes, what the crowd looked like at the Emirates, and your perspective on people's right to stay away from the stadium.
Yeah, I mean, it was very sparse, and that contributed to quite an eerie atmosphere at times, particularly in the first half, where you've got, as you say, a game that doesn't really mean a great deal in the great scheme of things. Lots of people have decided to stay away, and then you get the kind of the fare we were served in the first half. It all contributes to a very eerie atmosphere. There's not a lot of intensity. It saps the occasion, as it were, of a lot of its intensity. And for kind of 30 minutes or so, I mean, the game was played pretty much in silence until, a couple of moves that kind of broke down, and we had to pass back to David Ospina, which kind of woke people up because it annoyed them. And so they got a bit shirty, and that's really never far below the surface at the Emirates nowadays. That kind of, I feel like that's the reason a lot of people still go, actually. Not everyone, but there's a small section who I think go to exercise themselves of their negativity, and that's kind of what they get out of it. But as in, for people's right to stay away, of course they have absolutely every right if they've paid. They've got absolutely every right not to go if they don't want to. It's a fairly striking form of protest because it cannot escape the notice of the manager, or indeed the players, or even some of the members of the board. Whether it gets the owner's attention, I'm not quite sure. I'm sure that the CEO would probably feed that back to him. People have every right to do that if they want. I kind of think it's a shame, not least because, I think English football fans from across teams are doing a really good case for building a really good case for things like reduced ticket prices and safe standing and stuff like that. And if people are paying for tickets and not using them, that doesn't really help build the case that tickets are too expensive. But that's not everybody's fight, and they don't have to get involved in that if they don't want to. So they've got every right. And it's difficult to know how else, really, especially in this day and age, that fans register their kind of dissatisfaction. And this is a natural culmination, because last year what we had was just out-and-out disgruntlement. I think the fans made a bit of a play to try and get rid of the manager last year, because they didn't see anyone stepping in to do that. And once it kind of failed, the kind of answer is to stay away, really, which is which is a real shame. And I don't think it's likely to change until the manager changes, like so many things about Arsenal at the moment.
Yeah, and I mean, I think sometimes we presume intention where maybe no intention exists. And what I mean by that is that you see a half-empty stadium and things aren't great at Arsenal and people want the manager out, and it's easy to impute from that a living form of protest, that these people are staying away as a protest. And I think that's a mistake, because at the end of the day, it's 6th versus 19th on Easter Sunday. And I think it can just as easily be a case of, I don't want to go. I don't want to go watch a partial. Yeah, I don't want to go. And by the way, apathy is arguably more dangerous than protest, because protest indicates deep feeling, and it's easier to get back people that care deeply. Apathy suggests a loss of connection, and a loss of connection can be much more enduring.
Yeah. The protest community, as it were, is away games. That's where it is very valuable, because you've got all of those people who follow the club everywhere and are a bit more engaged. I think a lot of people confuse, let's say, Twitter with the Emirates, and actually I would argue that the genome, for want of a better word, of the Emirates crowd, probably most of them aren't even on Twitter, don't really engage with Arsenal or football other than when they go to games. They don't read about it, they don't go on social media about it, it only exists in that 2 hours, and actually a lot of them, like you say, it's just kind of, it's a Sunday. Do I really, Arsenal aren't really playing for anything at the moment. Do I really want to, go and watch Arsenal play Stoke in a game that doesn't really mean anything? And I think you're right. I think when it comes to the Emirates, it's not a kind of a protest atmosphere, as it were, but at away games, you get that quite a bit more.
Yeah, and look, I mean, go ahead, Paul.
Elliot, could I just quickly add?
I'd prefer you didn't.
I'm not an expert on this, Tim, but I think it's pronounced gnome.
Genome.
Also, there is an E in this word.
Okay. Yeah, at the end.
Okay.
Hang on, Elliot.
Right.
No, I'm not done yet.
Damn it.
So I don't think we should ignore the depressing effect of Jesus being dead on proceedings.
Well, we've had 2,000 years to get over it. So, I mean,
Wow.
to be fair, we've only had a few months to get over Arsenal being shit. So, I mean, that's the fresher wound. So, I mean, you take from it what you want. Anyway, enough of that. Look, I will say this. I think it is insane for a journalist who is paid to go to football, who hasn't paid in years, and I realize at one time was probably a paying customer, so to speak, but who hasn't paid in years, to tut fans that stay away to spend Easter Sunday with their family or doing whatever they want instead of watching Arsenal play Stoke in a meaningless game. Like, that's just ridiculous. Yeah.
It's always happened as well. Just look at some of the attendance numbers in the 80s, for example, when things weren't going great. Attendances just drop off. That's just,
The idea that you have an obligation to be at the game is just insanity. If it's not enjoyable, don't go. This is not a wake for the passing of a relative, although it feels like that at times. This is not an obligation.
Is dead, Elliot.
We've covered that, Paul. We've covered that at length.
Okay.
And in fact, to be fair, on Easter Sunday, isn't he risen? Isn't that?
Yeah. Well, come on.
Who can say?
Come
for
on,
sure?
Elliot. Let's get real here. No, but I got to say it's a meaningless game. This was the Schadenfreude derby.
Yeah. There's a lot of Schadenfreude in this one.
Yeah, we get to nail them in the coffin of their relegation. It was wonderful.
You breaking out the nail analogies? I mean, that's a little heavy-handed, a little on the nose there. I mean, look, blasphemy aside, let's get to the actual match. And Paul, I think the lineup was one that seemed to, I think, create some consternation. For me, I am a believer that we should be flushing the Premier League completely down the toilet until our Europa League campaign is done, and preparing in whatever way is best to suit us to be ready for the Thursday night games. Now, you could argue that playing well and cohesively and with sharpness and vibrance and winning games comfortably is the best way to prepare. But I thought the manager made some sensible choices here. So, did you take the same perspective, or would you like to have seen him go full strength from the start?
Well, I didn't really understand the lineup from that kind of logic standpoint, but I didn't worry about it too much. I mean, he doesn't really have a lot of pressure on him to do anything right now, so he can basically do what he wants. So based on what we know and what we don't know, it's one of those where I just assume he kind of took into account all the factors and picked the best kind of compromise of everything. I wasn't too exercised about it for the reasons we all talked about, which was this was not the most significant game on the planet beyond the Schadenfreude derby aspect. And the other thing is, for those who say everybody should be rested or not rested, I think it depends on the players and who had international duty. I didn't really understand Xhaka not playing. Maybe he played 2 games over the international break, but I don't know. On the other hand, what you did see in this game, I mean, it took us forever to get going. This was this our worst performance of the season? It felt like it. We were just.
I think it was our most. It was our most staid or anodyne performance. I don't know that it was our worst because we've had games where we've fallen behind early. But in terms of a lack of really having any involvement in the match, any cohesion to the match, certainly it was up there.
Yeah, and I think 16 days without playing as a team, and even players who play on international break, I mean, they're on the bench for a lot of it. There's a lot of messing around. It's kind of disruptive. I mean, it's not a great excuse because we've played a lot better than this after international breaks. We've even played well after international breaks. But there's a lot of factors to throw in there. Resting Koscielny, I guess he played the second game against France. For France, I guess that made sense. But playing El Neni versus Xhaka, some people seem to think El Neni played well. For me, almost nobody played well. Not that I'd hammer any individual in particular, though I thought Ozil was that was something special. His performance, although we earned just the first penalty, or did he?
We'll come to
was it a penalty? I don't know. So it was just the selection was kind of like the game, the fixture, the day, the crowd. It was all just kind of like.
Lacking inspiration. Yeah, I think that's fair. Look, I want to, Clive, I want to give you the freedom of the podcast here, but I'm just going to put a couple of restrictions on you. For the first half, you can give me any answer you want for what went wrong the first half and why it was so bad, but here are the restrictions. I don't want you to refer to the international break or that the game didn't have stakes, or I want to know specifically, once the game kicked off and the players were on the pitch, aside from the fact that maybe they were feeling uninterested, disconnected, maybe they were struggling to wake up for an early kickoff, whatever it was, what was going wrong? What wasn't working on the pitch that led to such a sterile first half?
That's a great question, right? And it's exactly the one I've been thinking about. So yeah, bank holiday weekend over here, and you get a chance to watch a lot of football. And so, what's City on Saturday? And
they are something to behold.
Yeah. And what do? They're incredibly direct. They win races all over the pitch. They win races defensively. They win races offensively. They've got aggressive runners in wide areas. They hold their position, and they play forward. I think the last game I went to live was AC Milan game, and it really struck me how we don't play directly. If there's a forward pass on, it's got a little bit of risk, we go back to the centre half. It goes back out the other side, and it's just boring. Right, so with the miracle of Stat Zone, right, I had a look at the top 3 pass combinations that City had on Saturday night, and it was Fernandinho to Silva, De Bruyne to Fernandinho, and Fernandinho to De Bruyne. Right, look at our top 3 pass combinations yesterday: Chambers to Mustafi, Chambers to Monreal, Mustafi to Chambers. So what's that tell you? That tells you about the emphasis of our game. That tells you about where we play. That tells you how we lack bravery, we lack directness, we lack any form of devil. Right? So we're happy to trot out there in a home game, pass the ball around our back four, and try to fool 40 to 50,000 people that we're a good side. And I'm not going to rush to judgment here, but I bet you if we look back in historically about our pass combinations, our defenders would be there. And I looked at Liverpool's too, and Van Dijk is in all their top 7 pass combinations. But he's quite a progressive centre-half that drives into space and pushes the ball forward, right? So to put a bit of balance there. So it's not uncommon for that. But I looked at City and think, I can see where they play. Vincent Kompany's now staying fit. The reason he's staying fit, he's not running around. He's got good protection in front of him, and the emphasis of the game is not on him to build it. So he can save himself for defensive sprints. And I just feel the emphasis of our game is too much in our half, too much in safe areas, and not where our talent is. And you can't fool the punters. We're looking at this, looking at our £60 million striker and thinking, you're not touching the ball. We're looking at our midfielders, and they're getting dispossessed, making loose passes, and it's all down to intensity and approach and pattern of play. Our pattern of play is pretty boring right now. Right? We lack aggressive runners in wide areas. We're relying, and if you've got a fullbacks that are going to be playing a big game on Thursday night, they're not going to overload massively and make 60-yard sprints to get in on the far corner because there are big games coming up, right? So I'm going to caveat what I'm saying by saying the effort, the extra zip, the extra intensity comes when you really care. And for the first half, we didn't care and we took the easy option. But that's not the first time that's happened. Our pattern of play has become pretty sterile.
Yeah, I totally agree with that, and I think there's more terribleness there that we can dig into, and I'm going to reach for a little of it. I mean, there's a few problems. First of all, are you familiar? You guys know about the Great Pacific Garbage Patch? It's like this huge floating gyre of trash, a vortex of trash in the Pacific.
Plastic.
Yeah, so we have like the Great Midfield Basin Vortex, whatever you want to call it, a swath of empty pitch that is between whoever has the ball in our defensive third and where all the other players are. You watch it when Chambers steps up with the ball to try to begin an attacking move, or Mustafi does, or Ramsey dropped deep, or El Neni dropped deep and received the ball. There is a 25-yard blank space in front of them that no one runs into. One of the things that strikes me when you watch City, wherever the ball goes, there's a central player that sprints to give them a second option. So they always have the option to go out wide, right, to a fullback or backwards to a defender, but there is a hard sprint to run into the space in the center of the pitch, advanced from that player, to give them a progressive passing option. And it seems like our whole attacking philosophy is someone get it at the back and everyone just run up the pitch. And so the only out ball becomes the safe ball to your defensive partner or to the fullback. And there is no central progressive passing option. You know, I remember Sir Alex Ferguson's United teams.
Sir Alex.
The great man. Yeah, Sir Alex. Fine. Fergie. Red nose. How about that? Is that better?
Yeah.
Does that make you happy?
Yeah.
Purple nose. So that purple nose twat, according to Paul, who managed United, the feature of their game is they always seem to be going forward. They were always attacking. They were always progressive, and there was always a progressive pass that was on for everyone in the pitch. And, you know, this was before all these advanced metrics and advanced Pep Guardiola tactics, but they still did it then. We give our players no progressive options, and it's easy to beat up on someone like Danny Welbeck, who admittedly had as close to a 0 of a game as you can. But the problems for us start further back the pitch, and it starts, and maybe it was missing Xhaka, maybe it was because, you know, El Neni struggled to really influence the game, but we do not have those players that sprint into those spaces to give that extra progressive passing option. And as we progress the ball up the pitch, that space progresses with it, and there is a huge disconnect between the departments. The defensive department or the deep midfield department and the attacking departments, those systems, those parts of the squad are not connecting properly. Now, Tim, one thing...
Elliot, could I just say quickly to follow on from that? That's the overriding feeling I had at the end of this game is kind of the counterpoint, or the other side of the coin to your point versus what everybody else is doing. We're just missing the evil genius in midfield.
Yes.
The kind of the guy pulling the strings, the guy that everybody uses as a reference point, the guy who bollocks people who don't drop in from. Not only do we not have the evil genius, we don't even have the fucking cat. So But you know what, Paul? What I would say is, absent that, and I'll turn it back to you for a second, Clive. But absent that, Paul, what I would say, at a minimum, you could instruct your players that whenever El Neni has it, or whenever Chambers has it, so I want someone sprinting. You were really talking about the coaching.
Well, yeah, you're right. We don't have the player we don't have a player to imprint his authority, to stamp his authority on the middle of the pitch, but we also don't have the discipline to occupy those spaces that give that progressive passing option. And Clive, why don't you finish up on this topic? Because Tim, I want to ask about pressing.
Yeah, I think it's what we do when we talk about our team is we always flip back to individuals, but really it's how we play, it's the pattern. So, the next two top passers were Ramsey and Ozil. Decent players, you would say. Yeah, good passers. Who are they going to pass to? Where is the aggressive runners in wide areas? Where are those offensive people that make multiple sprints to move people around? They're not there, right? So we end up passing to other passers. And that's the problem. We lack the aggression, the penetration, the devastation to really move people around. And when we had that, I'm sure you'll come into the second half, when we had someone else to help that, and we had multiple runners, for the last 20 minutes, we look like a football team again.
Yeah.
Right, so it's all about the style of play before the players that are playing within it. But I'm afraid we have some major pillars in this team that massively dictate how we play. And some of them are our unbelievable favourite players. And I'm telling you, the way they play football is not where the future of the game is going. And I do believe we've got some major decisions to make.
Yeah, and we can talk about personnel, and there's no denying, first of all, that when we made the changes, it totally changed the game for us. When you add quality, you're going to get better. I fully acknowledge that. But our spacing is and always has been poor. And Tim, one of the things that's a little distressing to me, and we'll come on to the second half and the improvements in the better part momentarily, okay, because the last 20 minutes of the game were actually quite fun. But one of the things that was so astonishing to me is how effective Stoke were pressing us in the first 30 or 40 minutes of this game, and not even in the most coordinated way I'd ever seen, just running at guys with the ball. And it exploits our weaknesses so clearly. I mean, is that really right now the single biggest problem for Arsenal, is that whether it's a combination of spacing or lack of technical quality in midfield, that we cannot handle being pressed by even the 19th place team in the Premier League?
Yeah, that is a big problem. Even when Cazorla was fit, it was an issue. It tended to be an issue against the sides that were better at doing it. But you're right, it's an issue when anyone does it. I listened to, I can't remember which pod, it might have been the Watford one actually, which I wasn't on, and I listened to you guys talking about El Neni. And what really strikes me about El Neni is normally he's really good in home games, but not so good in away games. And Granit Xhaka is very similar. And why is that? That's because, and why is Arsenal's form so different at home compared to what it is away from home? Well, at home, teams don't tend to press us that much. They tend to sit off, so that guys like Xhaka, who I think we missed yesterday for all the reasons you've said about our build-up play. They give him time to pick the ball up off the centre back, do his 270 turn and get the ball on his left foot and get the ball up the pitch. He gets time to do that. El Neni as well gets a little bit of time, a little bit of space to run into to give us a bit of rhythm. I thought El Neni yesterday was far more. We saw far more from him what we usually see away from home, precisely because Stoke put us under a little bit of pressure as well. And I also think, given again the conversation you guys have just had and on the podcast put out last weekend about our wide players and the lack of threat we have from there. I mean, first of all, name the genuine wide players in Arsenal's squad. Iwobi. That's it.
I mean, I don't even. I wouldn't call him a wide player. Even.
I still think Iwobi's probably at best wide left. But who are we playing there? Ozil, Mkhitaryan, Wilshere,
Welbeck,
Iwobi, Aubameyang. I mean, there's no genuine wide threat there at all. Which we've lost Walcott, we've lost Chamberlain, we've even lost Alexis. We've lost guys who've got a bit of zip, in that area of the pitch, and that's a very big problem. And actually, what we saw, there's a really good article I would encourage everyone to read that Anam from Arsenal Column put out today about Ozil, and it's a really, as you expect from Anam, it's very tactically astute. He talks about Ozil's movements. in the game, and he basically says in the first half he was over on the right-hand side and he was just marked out of it, whereas in the second half he moved more over to the left. And the second we take Welbeck off and Aubameyang goes out on the wing, and I'm still not that keen on the idea of Aubameyang out wide. I mean, what happens? Ozil's moved over there anyway, and within 2 minutes Ozil's put Aubameyang through on goal because we finally got a bit of an aggressive runner in behind, and Ozil's worked out that the left-hand channel was where the space was and not over on the right. So, I mean, I think there were quite a lot of those issues, and Anam talks a lot about how Wenger has basically given Ozil carte blanche to kind of, not so much in a negative way, but to do what he wants, to rely on Ozil's football brain to understand where the space is and to move into it, and how this has actually had mixed success for us this season. But it worked yesterday because Ozil moved over towards the left, and that's where we started finding a little bit of space. But to kind of spin it back to your original question, yes, I think our complete inability to handle the press is very, very troubling. And now, you know, without Giroud, we don't even really have the direct option either. So it's all a bit of a hodgepodge, and it's why I think we should go back to three at the back. I think just because the wing backs are the only natural width we have. And Tim. I think it also gets Lacazette and Aubameyang up front together. I think you put Ozil behind, have Lacazette in that. You have almost like a dotted line between your front three. So you've got Ozil in the number 10, you've got Lacazette in the 9.5, you've got Aubameyang in the 9. And that's how I'd set this team up, and have Bellerin and Kolasinac, because who else is providing the width?
No one.
And giving us that option.
I cannot agree anymore, I tell you. And in the second half, Tim, if you noticed when Lacazette came on, the combination between Bellerin and Lacazette just sliding down the side. So you had a partnership on the left-hand side of Ozil and Aubameyang, a partnership on the right-hand side. That is the way we can get some aggressive running into our team without buying three wingers. That is the quickest way to get it sorted out, and I could not agree more.
Yeah, and by the way, I mean, look, I think you can point to two things. Look, we don't have wide players, so we don't use width as effectively as we could, although I think we have good fullbacks, good attacking fullbacks, but we don't have wide forwards to support them. But even when it comes to playing through the middle, I mean, we should have enough technical quality and enough players who occupy those central spaces that we can play through the middle. The problem is our distances. You know, when we start these attacking moves, there should be 6 or 7 or 8 yard passes you can make to a teammate. That's a progressive pass between the lines, but it's 20 and 25 yard passes. And so the only pass is out to the fullbacks. And meanwhile, there's a hilarious moment, and I don't remember the minute. I meant to write the minute down and reference it so people could go back and look. And I think it's Mustafi who has the ball. He picks the ball up. He steps forward to start an attacking move. And Aaron Ramsey just sprints up the pitch to the edge of the 18-yard box, like he's running a relay race or something. He's just gone. He runs all the way out of the picture till you can't see him anymore. And then he's covered up by a.
He's like that guy who's back from the Vietnam War with PTSD. Time the phone rings, Gump? He runs out of the room. Yeah,
yeah,
he's out of the room.
Well, but I mean, and it's just so then you have El Neni covered up by two midfielders, and the only place that Mustafi has to wind up going with it is I think he tries to make a tricky pass to Monreal, pinned it up against the touchline, and we lose possession. And so, you know, I think whether you want to play wide or whether you want to play central, you still have to get your spacing right. You still have to get your distances right, and you have to create better, easier progressive opportunities for your teammates to advance the ball up the pitch, and we don't do that. So,
I think just quickly, given that we're going to change who the coach is, and that he kind of delegates that to his on-field geniuses, and that's Ozil. From a midfield standpoint, it's going to be Ozil and whoever's in midfield. That's why until we get a midfield genius who sits deeper, who those work as an axis to kind of organize everybody who comes into play around them. I think we're going to struggle. But with Arsene in control, until he gets that player, we're going to struggle.
Yeah, I agree with that, Clive. Yeah, please, chime in.
Do you understand? Tim's point about the back three is really important. And I don't want to make sure people miss it, right? Because as we got some much bigger games against much better teams, potentially someone like Atletico Madrid to get us into the promised land, what do you think they're going to do to us? They're going to press us, right? So unless we have that exit plan in wide areas and a pattern of play which involves aggressive running in wide areas, we're going to get burned. Atletico Madrid will want us to play narrow. They will want us to come inside, and then they will spring on us. They will hit the forward directly, and they will run us backwards, right? So we've really got to think about it. This isn't about Stoke. This is about Arsenal developing the quickest way to Rome, a pattern of play that's going to take us to a big game win, right? And I think it's really important we think about this. I just don't think people are. They're looking at ways to get just their favourites on, the two forwards on or whatever, which I want to see as well. But when it comes down to it, which I want to see two forwards on, without a doubt. But we can't do it in the Europa League, right? So, but I do want to see the emphasis of our play moving into wide areas and further forward, and not amongst our centre-backs, our 5'10" centre-backs, stroking the ball to each other slowly, popped it into El Neni, who gives it straight back to them. That's not football. No,
and I agree with all of that. I just think that whatever formation you use, we've seen it in every formation, that the parts of the team get disconnected from one another, and that the linking up between the defense and the midfield and the forward line, I mean, it's just not spaced properly. It doesn't look like it's set up across the pitch the right way, and the way we use space is so bizarre because you'll have 2 or 3 Arsenal players standing within 3 yards of each other at some times, clogging up space, and then you'll have other times where we're trying to start to build play, and there's a 20-yard gap in the center of the pitch, leaving us only the fullbacks or a backwards pass to go to. So something has to be done to change this.
That's our deliberate accordion philosophy.
The accordion philosophy, I think, Paul, we can agree that in 1986, John Hammerschmidt wrote the pivotal document showing that the accordion philosophy is no longer apt. So we can move on from that. Tim, explain
you
to
cut me there.
Yeah, no, I just feel that stare decisis now. So, Tim, explain for me what Danny Welbeck was doing on Sunday.
Yeah, it was kind of difficult to... I mean, I'd heard some suggestion that he was carrying a bit of a knock on his back, which would make some sense because it's... With Welbeck, you've always got the kind of, well, he can't finish, but his movement's very good, or he's good at striking up partnerships with other players. I think the problem is Welbeck is he's a bit of a sponge, right? So the reason he strikes up partnerships with good players is because he's quite, for want of a better word, subservient. He's good at spotting what other players' qualities are and going, right, I will adapt my game so that you can get the best out of yours, which makes him, which is why a lot of managers like him. It's probably why he's not a great striker, though. He doesn't have that ruthless kind of single-mindedness. I think the issue now is, well, we're a team with not that many goal scorers in it, and he's playing with Wilshere and Mkhitaryan and Ozil and players like this, and he doesn't quite know how to play in a team like that where he's supposed to be one of the wide forwards. He's supposed to be one of the principal goal threats. He's not meant to really be a foil for someone else anymore. And really, what I was just saying about the complete lack of wide players, the complete lack of wide forwards, what Danny Welbeck should be doing now is looking at this squad, and if, presuming he's interested in a future at Arsenal, he should be kind of saying to himself, well, look, we've got Aubameyang now, we've got Lacazette, centre forward is all but closed off to me, other than the League Cup and when there's a bit of an injury crisis. Although if we do end up playing 2 up front, that actually might open the door to him a little bit more, because then that moves him to first reserve. But the spot he should be looking at in the squad, he should be looking at Theo Walcott and going, right, Walcott's gone.
Yep.
That's the wide forward that scored all the goals, and maybe a bit like me, sometimes his feet didn't always talk to his brain. But, Theo stayed at Arsenal for over a decade purely because, he had some threat and some end product from out wide. He didn't have a lot else. He was technically pretty subpar. He put in some of the worst performances I've seen from an attacking Arsenal player. yet he always had that devil. You know, he always had that that goal in him, and that's what Danny Welbeck should be looking at. He should be looking at where are the gaps in the squad, wide forward, goal scoring wide forward, someone who can beat players, someone who gives us that little bit of devil out wide. That's where I can make a contribution here, because Arsenal are currently playing a load of central midfielders or number 10s in these positions. This is where my spot is. This is what's open to me in the squad. And yesterday was a real opportunity, and I think he might have been played yesterday because I've got a feeling he's going to play in that, or, well, maybe this audition might have talked the manager out of it, but I think he's thinking of playing Welbeck wide and Lacazette up front for the Europa League games, precisely to give us a little bit of that, you know, that, shall we say, goal-scoring threat in inverted commas. But that's what Welbeck should be looking at. He should be saying that there is a spot open for a wide forward in this team, and I can do that. And yeah, it wasn't terribly convincing yesterday. And again, like the second he came off, Aubameyang immediately, within seconds of drifting over to that flank, finds space to run in behind. And it just doesn't look like it. Just Welbeck wasn't making those runs. He's making those runs he makes when he plays centre forward, where he comes to the ball. He comes towards the game. He doesn't want the game to go ahead of him. He gets attracted. And, you know, what we really needed him to do yesterday was to stretch the pitch, you know, do some good running, occupy some of Stoke's centre halves. And, you know, particularly in the first half when Stoke were pressing quite high, they had a pretty high line. And, you know, they don't have particularly fast defenders, Stoke. And I think this is a criticism of Aubameyang for me as well in the first half. You know, from my perch where I sit in the upper tier, I was looking in the first 30 minutes and I was thinking that I know they're pressing high, but honestly, one long ball could undo these because there's like 40 yards of green space in behind them. We've got Aubameyang up front, but Aubameyang wasn't really quite playing on the shoulder, or wasn't really, you know, looking to spin in behind, and neither was Welbeck, and that kind of confused me. But yeah, I feel like yesterday was a big opportunity for Welbeck that he didn't really take. No,
I thought he was really poor. But can I play devil's advocate just for a minute and sort
Go
of
for it.
Throw a bunch of word salad out there and hope that it means something in the end? I think, you know, you can only have so many players whose impact of the game is off the ball in 111. You know what I mean? Like if you look at Manchester City, can you even name a player in their starting 11 that isn't good on the ball, that can't be influential with the ball at their feet? I mean, so my argument is simply that, and you mentioned Theo, and I think this is a good point. Theo had his best seasons playing with Robin van Persie, who was very ball dominant, who would play false nine, who would drop in, who could receive the ball, give the ball, then turn and run in behind. And that worked really well with them. But Aubameyang is different. Aubameyang is a player whose strengths really are off the ball. His elite running and his elite finishing. He's not great on the ball. He's not a great passer. He's not a great dribbler. So you have Aubameyang who's not going to get too involved in the build-up. Then you take Danny Welbeck, who, again, his strengths are his running, the way he drags people into space, that chaos that he causes, that nuisance he becomes with his physicality and his running. But again, not great on the ball. And I just think that the worry is when you have an elite center forward whose best qualities are off the ball, and then you have a not-so-elite guy trying to play one of the linking forwards or nominally wide forwards, but he's also not great on the ball, that now you struggle to build the play and create those opportunities for your elite striker, because you're really putting all of that responsibility on Ozil. I mean, Jack can do a little of that, but I think he struggled as well, and I don't think any of us believe that number 10 position is suiting him brilliantly. So I think in terms of trying to control the game and build the play and get the ball into players who can spot those little darting runs for Aubameyang, you need that extra ball playing forward. You know, and a ball dominant forward. I mean, Alexis was like the most ball dominant forward you can imagine. Danny Welbeck is the opposite of that.
Yeah, and actually that's probably where we miss Mkhitaryan a bit, because Mkhitaryan, you know, if you're playing a front three and you've got kind of Ozil behind, this is one of the problems really of having nominally Ozil as part of your front three. But if you've got, say, Aubameyang up front, then you've got Mkhitaryan wide right, for example. He's more that kind of creative on-ball presence. And actually, I was impressed with him when he came on. as well, and that was also largely because we had nothing on the right hand side, and he helped kind of fill that. And I've been actually quietly impressed with him. I think he's becoming a quite important member of that attack. But
yeah.
But that would have been a better balance, like Mkhitaryan, Aubameyang, and then Welbeck. Yeah, then he's perhaps got more kind of currency to be that off the ball running kind of threat. But when it's Ozil who's really just drifting about, and I don't think Welbeck, probably understandably because he's only been at the club a little while, but hasn't quite worked Aubameyang out yet. And when it's a front three of Welbeck, Aubameyang, and then sort of Ozil or sort of Wilshere, it's a bit. I mean, Welbeck's a guy who thrives in structure, right? And I think Michael Cox tweeted about this a couple of weeks ago. He said actually he thought that Welbeck to Arsenal was a really poor move for this reason, because Welbeck is a guy who's really good at working to plan and good at giving you structure, and Arsenal is one of the most structureless kind of elite teams in Europe, and maybe that's just a problem we can't really shift.
With Welbeck, Tim, I feel you've got to give him a job. You've got to give him one job, right?
Exactly.
So if you think back to the cup final, he had one job. You are free forward, you are at the top of our team, and I want you to work their centre-backs. I want you to make multiple runs. I don't care what you do, because we've got two players smart behind you that will work from your space. That's a great job for him, because he can do that all day. Sprint, 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 sprint. Cause trouble, fall over, doesn't matter. Ozil Sanchez sitting behind me, Ramsey joining in.
Problem is, that's Aubameyang's job now, isn't it?
Well, and he's a different player, right? So now you put him on the left, you're asking him to do certain jobs, more than one job. I think he struggled. Just to add a little bit, he did sort of get an injury quite early, and it was as though he could have actually come off quite early, according to TV, but he seemed to run it off. So I'm wondering if he was actually fit at all during the game before we completely destroyed his Arsenal career. But I do think it doesn't take away from the point. Yeah, I think you're right, Tim. One job, keep it simple. You do that, we'll work around you. If you give him 2 or 3 jobs, I think he can struggle on what his primary role is, and that's when we lose him.
Yeah, I think when you're at home to a weaker team and you know you're going to have 60-65% possession, and you have an elite center forward who likes to run into space and be off the ball dominant, then I think you need those creative players, those forwards that are tasked with finding him in that space to be more ball dominant and more technically adept, and Welbeck can't do that. And so then I think you have one less opportunity to find the space, and maybe the runs they make cancel each other out. And I just don't think that looked anything like a partnership that worked. What did work was Lacazette. And Paul, I do want to get to the positives this match, and I think Lacazette is a huge positive. Now, I went completely apoplectic watching Aubameyang get shifted out to the wing, and I hope that is not the plan going forward, that if we're going to play these two together, it'll be Aubameyang out wide, because it doesn't make any sense to me. Here's a player who's not a great dribbler, not a great passer, but makes great runs and finishes well and is blindingly fast. And in Lacazette, you have a better all-arounder who can play the football and help find those dagger balls into Aubameyang, but also connect in the build-up. But regardless of my ability to find the cloud in every silver lining, let's talk about Lacazette. I thought he did really, really well coming on. It's a really encouraging sign for the Europa League. Do you agree?
Yeah. No, I thought he had a very good game. I think he's probably going to struggle, though, still on Thursday from a fitness standpoint, and to impress himself on the game. And he did come on with some pretty good companies, because he had, Aubameyang as his winger, Mkhitaryan on the other side, and Ozil against a Stoke that was beginning to think it might not be their day. So it may have flattered him a little bit, but I like the overall plan. I certainly thought he had a very good game. He's a moody-looking fella, isn't he? But
it's just the beard.
Aubameyang, he's just so like happy and
it's hard to look moody when you have a name carved into your head. I think when you have a brooding beard, it's a little bit easier.
Yeah, because his granny died. But that somersault Paul. He does, he makes that somersault look so easy. I had to go at it. It's much harder than you think.
I don't believe you. Not that it's not harder.
Anyway,
you had to go
here's
at it.
The point I did want. Yeah, I do actually have a football point, which was why. It's a question to you, Elliot. but I'll try and do it Elliot style. I'll actually talk for ages asking you the question, making my point.
Perfect.
Which is, isn't Aubameyang like, you like the idea of what Welbeck could do, you like what Walcott could do for us. Isn't Aubameyang, when played on the left, now control yourself, Elliot, basically the intersection of their best abilities? And is there not a good rationale? Not that I'm wedded to it always being Lacazette who would be in the middle and Aubameyang on the left, but as soon as, I'll tell you who played really well when Lacazette came on, Aubameyang. He had our first two, nailed on, should have done better there, should have beat the keeper opportunities. Two very quickly. And it worked. And Ozil was out there pinging balls. And while I agree with you, he's not the hog the ball, play on the ball, I think you have undersold collectively. You should all be ashamed of this. Undersold his technical abilities. And there's also this, I know there's this accepted wisdom that he was not great at Dortmund on the left for the first season, and then Lewandowski went off and he moved to the middle. I still think he was pretty good. Now, I know you believe in always playing the best players in their best positions and all that kind of stuff.
To a logical end, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but a player who plays as a wide forward, as Theo used to, with his kind of pace, with Lacazette dropping a little deeper, picking up the ball and pulling centre-backs with him, he's going to get that diagonal run into space, and it's a lot harder to get that space when you're the centre-forward. In fact, even in the first half, he was kind of squirreling over to the right to try and get some angled runs in behind. It was probably a little too late in the first half for it to be a frequently used tactic. But I think it's going to be interesting to see them find their balance between the two of them.
Sure.
Unfortunately, we only get to see it in Premier League games, but Arsene might try and do it a lot because he needs, Aubameyang has to play in the Premier League, and Lacazette needs the games so that he's sharp when playing Europa League, and there's no point in playing Lacazette into position he's never going to play in the Europa League. So I think you'll get to enjoy seeing the configuration quite a lot more. And, when you add in Mkhitaryan and Ozil, that's a lot of very clever players who can create angles and who know how to find Aubameyang's diagonals. So I think we might enjoy it a lot.
Sure, and let me say a few things about this. First of all, I think Aubameyang is a good wide player. The problem isn't that he's not a good wide player. The problem is that he is one of the 3 or 4 best pure center forwards in all of Europe that we paid £60 million for. And so I would rather benefit from having one of the best center forwards in world football than a good wide player. I also think that while he did make that run from a wide position that Ozil found him in, and I think that's great, realistically, you don't have that much space to run into. I mean, you're talking 80th minute of a game, you're leading 1-0, and the other team's starting to push up, and they're also tired, and they're also terrible. The reality is that the wide player, more often than not, is going to have to drop a little deeper, get the ball to feet, try to beat a man, try to make a pass. Those are not his best qualities. So I agree, if we thought there was going to be lots of channel space and half space to run into behind defenders, then fine, play him out wide, because that's what we want him doing. But by and large, your wide players do have to get on the ball, they do have to dribble, they do have to pass, they do have to drop a little deeper. And there were a lot of situations in the last 20 minutes where we were counterattacking or bringing the ball up the pitch, and Aubameyang actually had to try to make up the ground. He wasn't leading that counterattack. And in one instance, I think it was Bellerin who was racing up the pitch on the right, and Aubameyang had like 30 yards he had to make up to try to get into the play. So, it's not that I don't think he can be good on the wing. Of course he can. He's an exceptional player. I think he's
probably our best wide man now.
Well, so yeah, that is absolutely true. And that's sort of the problem is, do you want to take one of the best strikers in world football at £60 million and convert him to a wide player because you don't have one? Or do you want to find a configuration that gets him back into his best position? That's just... And
I think before and after the summer is different questions, right?
Yes.
You getting really upset about it next year, that probably makes loads of sense.
Getting upset about it now does not. You're right. That's absolutely fair.
Think you're concerned that it's Wenger's thinking, and so you're going to end up seeing it next season too. Yes. But right now it's all about the Europa League while keeping the Premier League from making sure you don't have too many negative vibes or issues with personnel from the Premier League. So
I will acknowledge it is probably an overreaction to worry about how we use these two together for the remainder of this season. What is most important, if Arsene sticks around, is what he's doing next season. So, Clive, I do want to give you a chance to talk about Lacazette, because I saw you on Twitter at least saying that you were pretty impressed with how he was doing. I mean, what do you see? This is a player that you were a little worried about earlier in the season, whether he had what it takes. I think you were impressed with him against Stoke. What did you see?
Yeah, I was impressed. The game that turned it for me was Man United, actually. Man United at home, I thought he was tremendous against a really physical team, and he out-physicaled them and was very unlucky not to end up a hero. But you could see the potential in him that day. And, to work out the conundrum of Aubameyang and Lacazette, I thought Lacazette's intelligence is great. His timing is great. His movements are very smart, and he's a good footballer. I always said this from the very first time I saw him. I thought he was more a 10 than a 9. He's more a 9.5. He's more a Firmino type player. He's somebody that gives you that structure. It's interesting, France don't play him and Giroud together. They play one or the other. They see him as that central brain to their team. And so you have to get, to use Aubameyang, you almost have to use him as a free forward. So you just go where you like, find space, sit on shoulders. Lacazette will be our structure. He'll be the primary player in our pattern of play. Aubameyang's major weakness, I don't know if you've noticed, when he has to come short, he gets beaten on those races and people come around him. Yeah. He doesn't set his feet. He doesn't get fouls from behind. He's easy to blow past. You can tear through him and go and get the ball. Whereas you can't tear through Lacazette. He sets his feet. He has a wide stance. He gets low. He has a touch move. He keeps you off balance. He turns around. He combines. Lacazette is very smart footballer that can play slightly deeper. And then Aubameyang's all about how can I win races around me? How can I catch people as Ozil's got the ball? I'll make my run 2-3 yards. I'm on the move. I win the race. He's a very smart mover. He runs laterally across the line. I think they are a perfect pair. I really do. And we've got to decide how we want to get them in. Lacazette is reminding us all what we've missed. And I hope he can continue it. And it was interesting what Steve Bold said, that maybe the injury has really helped him, because it probably allowed him to do some extra, power work in the gym, some extra upper body work. And I'm just, Stoke are not little flowers, right? And he looked physically comfortable, didn't he, in the game? So I'm really hopeful, really hopeful.
Well, that's good, because, obviously, forgetting what happens next season or in the Premier League this season, our Europa League campaign depends heavily on him being used the right way and having the confidence and the form and the quality to take us all the way to winning the competition. And I think because we bought Aubameyang, it's easy to forget how much we spent on Lacazette and how excited we were for his arrival. And I'm not sure he's done much wrong this season. He's been kind of bad away, but the whole team has been pretty terrible on its travels. And so, Tim, I don't want to make this the Lacazette podcast, but I think it'd be unfair to shut you out of this conversation because it's so important. Have we kind of forgotten that this is a quality player that we spent a lot of money on just because we made another quality purchase in the same area?
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't think Lacazette started very, very well. I happen to think that actually he played some of his best football at the start with Welbeck in one of the two kind of positions behind him. I think those two had quite a good blend because they kind of played like a strike partnership, and I tend to think that's what both of them needs. I think, to his credit, Lacazette could be a 10 or a 9. In your kind of old-fashioned strike partnership, you have a kind of, I suppose if you look at it like Emil Heskey and Michael Owen, you have one guy lives to serve and the other one is there to score kind of thing. You have, or Alan Smith and Ian Wright back in the day, where Alan Smith, and perhaps Alan Smith is a good comparison actually for Lacazette, because Alan Smith moved from being Arsenal's kind of prominent goal threat, and then we signed Ian Wright, and what he became was basically the foil for Ian Wright. And I think the strength of Lacazette is that he can either be a 10 or a 9. He can be he can be servant or master, and I think that kind of showed in the fairly short cameo he had. I think that was aided and abetted by the fact that, yes, we had someone as forward-thinking and as penetrative on the left as Aubameyang. Ozil had really worked out where the space was by then as well, where we'd had nothing on the right all afternoon, as we never do because we leave Bellerin completely on his own. I think Lacazette had worked out, right, I'm going to go and drift towards the right because on the left, we've already got Ozil and Aubameyang and they're taking care of business out there. What I need to do is perhaps drift slightly to the right. And I think he did that very well. He was very, very intelligent about how he went about that. I mean, I'm not convinced, for example, we'd have got much more out of him than, say, Aubameyang if we just completely swapped them over from the start. I don't think Lacazette necessarily will have done a lot more than Aubameyang did in that very impoverished first half. So he kind of came into quite a good situation when he came on, but he did make a real difference. And I agree with Clive. I think on paper, and I think we saw a bit of it yesterday, there's a real partnership potentially between him and Aubameyang. And you know, another player we've not really seen him with yet is Mkhitaryan, because he's not really had that much of a chance to play with him. So, you know, there might be a potential partnership there. We'll have to wait and see. But I completely agree. It's been a bit weird, actually, because Lacazette started so well that kind of took the immediate pressure and criticism away. And then over Christmas, he starts to struggle. And I think the injury did actually come at a really, really good time for him, because before yesterday, his last contribution was a last-minute miss, a big miss in a North London derby in the last minute. And there was perhaps a little bit of, some concerns turned into proper disgruntlement. And then he immediately goes away for 6 weeks. We've got Aubameyang, and, Welbeck scored twice against AC Milan. So he's not really there. We don't massively miss him, but it just gives everyone a chance to take a breath. Before he came on yesterday, the reception was, when his name was read out on the bench, there was big cheer. And when he came on, there was a massive cheer. And I think also the significance of Aubameyang giving him that penalty.
Where do you stand on that, by the way?
I think it was brilliant. Mm-hmm. Yeah, because I think, Aubameyang was intelligent enough to see that he needed that. And that, for our prospects this season, Lacazette being confident is a huge part of it. You can see it meant something to Lacazette when he put that away. He even though it was 3-0 in pretty much the last minute, he properly celebrated it. And I think really because he performed well in that last few minutes as well, that maybe if it had just performed well, but the other guy gets 2 goals, and so no one really thinks and talks about you. But when you're a striker and you cap it off with a goal, it just means a lot more. I think, and particularly going into Thursday, that could be a huge thing. But yeah, I was very enthused, and usually you talk about injuries being really unfortunate, but I think this is one of those rare occasions where it's actually worked out pretty well for Lacazette. Yeah,
I mean, it maybe would have been nice if he got fit just a little sooner, because I do question whether he'll start on Thursday, and I think it would be much better if he does. So that's really the key question.
It's really a shame he didn't break his leg, isn't it?
Yeah, it's too bad. Paul, let's do this real quick. We'll finish out the game this way. I mean, I thought the first penalty was probably maybe not a penalty. I think the second penalty was almost certainly a penalty. Either way, fuck you, Stoke. We don't really care. I don't think this podcast has ever gone in too deep on the was it or was it not a penalty discussion, so I don't think we necessarily need to do that. But I think we should just mention Jack Wilshere briefly. So the changes made a huge difference in this game, and El Neni came off, and Welbeck came off, and Wilshere came off. And I thought all 3 of those players struggled. But Wilshere, who had shown some promise earlier in the season, has struggled again. And the manager seems very determined to stick with him. But the rubber's starting to meet the road now, because he's got Lacazette back. He can play Lacazette with Welbeck and then play Ramsey, Xhaka, Ozil, and leave Jack out of the lineup. I don't know if he'll be inclined to do that. Certainly Iwobi seems to have fallen out of favor, but he's another one he could replace him with. Do you think it's reached the point where the manager probably can't rely on Jack to be starting the big Europa League games?
It's going to be very interesting. I didn't think Jack was that bad in this game. I thought he was probably one of our better first half players.
He had some really terrible giveaways, but they all did. I mean, we did that thing for a while where none of us could pass to a teammate. Yeah,
it was abysmal. but beyond that, I do think he's kind of flatlined recently. His trajectory was pretty good. I was kind of fairly optimistic, but he just kind of, I think physically and in terms of overall performances, he's kind of hit a level that makes him a very interesting squad player and doesn't make him a starting 11 player. So he may find, especially with the contract stuff going on or not going on, I think I could see him getting squeezed out from a Europa League standpoint, barring injuries. Because when you look at, I guess we don't have the Aubameyang piece, but we have Ozil, Mkhitaryan,
Lacazette, Welbeck, Ramsey, Xhaka. There you go.
Yeah. So if everybody's fit, then, but he's probably first sub unless the situation or kind of first replacement unless the situation demands more of an Iwobi or a Welbeck. The manager still seems to like Welbeck as an option. So, yeah, he's going to have to fight even for that first sub place because he's just not at a level that makes it clear he should be starting.
Yeah, I think the position he's been put in hasn't been the best for him, and certainly there's the burst does not seem to be there right now, which I think is a little concerning. He's not being able to burst away from players, and you do just wonder why he's not playing a little further back, where I think he'd be a little more comfortable, especially when Xhaka's not playing, because I think he could ape that role a little bit, but that's not how the managers wanted to use him, and I don't think it's been to his credit.
But so if we say there was a reason why Xhaka didn't start yesterday, who would have and you were going to use Jack, who would your midfield pairing be?
Well, I am of the opinion that you can put Ramsey further forward, that he, first of all, is the engine to come back and help out when he needs to, but that it's his second man runs and his little play around the box that really distinguishes him from some of the other midfielders in the world, that he can play just that bit closer, that 5-10 yards closer to goal. So I think you could have put Jack and Elneny together and let Jack sort of do that deep distribution thing and occasionally step out of a challenge here or there, like, Xhaka doesn't have the feet to step out of the challenge, but I think Jack can play those passes, and maybe it means fewer sprints and recovery runs.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I actually would much prefer to see Jack given more runs as that second pivot position. And I mean, what I do like between him and Ramsey is they actually like each other and like playing with each other, and there is a reasonable amount of swapping during the game, and they do tend to find each other. But I think it would have worked better if it was Jack a little deeper and Ramsey a little further forward, especially in this game, given that they weren't really pressing our midfield players, and Jack could have picked some passes and Ramsey could have made some runs to get in behind.
And Ramsey was a little restrained, I thought, in this game as a result of where he was starting. But Clive, so I know Jack is a big favorite of yours, and you do want him to...
Not really.
Well, all right. Let me put it this way. I think it could be said that you
one more player Clive has it in for.
Do you do like any of our players, for God's sakes? No. All right. Well, so what do you make of where he's headed?
Not really. No. No.
Sure seems that way.
Jack. Jack flatlined the moment we moved him further forward, right? So he's playing 10, and we spoke about this before. He's having to make bigger sprints, and he's flagging. And what him and Ramsey do, they rotate a little bit. So Ramsey pushes and Jack fills in. Look, where he is in his career, he's a very intelligent centre midfield footballer that can take the ball and he can move it quickly off one touch. The moment he does that, we look faster. And that's the trick. Moving the ball quickly because your body position is right and you've got a picture. And why we look so slow yesterday. I know Elneny's getting a bit of stick, but he tries to punch it. He follows the pass. He tries to get the speed in. We just spent too much time playing in the wrong areas, right? So, Jack does it naturally. He's got a real aggressive intent, and I like how he tries to play. I do like it. I like his bravery, but I'm afraid the body isn't there to be a top player that's going to take us to win the league. He's good enough to play for Arsenal. He's a Premiership footballer, no problem at all. But I'm looking at the teams that are in our competitive landscape, and I'm saying, okay, if you were playing up against Dembele 3 times in a season, how many times would you win that battle? Right? So if you're playing against De Bruyne and Silva, how would you do against those 2 3 times in a season? Are we going to beat them away from home? And I'm looking at our players, and I'm asking myself that question. Because for us to find the 25 points that we need to be competitive, 25 points.
It's a lot of points.
We need to be winning some of those battles. We need to be and the moment I said that, none of you guys were jumping down my throat, right? And because there's a question to be asked about that. And I do like Jack. I like him a lot. I even like Aaron Ramsey. I like Herzl. I asked myself that question.
Even like Aaron Ramsey.
Yeah, I asked myself the question. No, seriously, I'm not the person that answers this question the most. Is actually Aaron Ramsey, because he has been to Chelsea and sorted Kante out. He has been to some of these grounds and sorted their best midfielder out. And I question some of the others. So we have to ask ourselves that question. How are we going to find 25 points? We have to dominate that central area. We have to have a pattern of play, and it has to be aided and abetted by wide, aggressive runners to allow us to close the gap and make teams run backwards. And Jack is somebody, I like how he tries to play, but I'm just sorry, mate, I don't see the promised land coming. I really don't.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean I want him sold. Doesn't mean I want him to go back to Bournemouth. I'd love him to stay because he's very important to the club. But I'm talking about 25 points. When you judge this team, judge it on 25 points, not what you like, not who you like. Where the 25 points coming from?
I mean, Calciopoli by the refs. I mean, pay off the opponents. All I'm saying is I've seen it work before, and nothing else we've tried has worked. Of course, that would require Stan to spend some of his hard-earned cash, so maybe we'll have to go another direction. Tim, it's the end of the friendlies. The friendlies have come to an end. The real match starts on Thursday. It's CSKA Moscow at the Emirates. It's a quarterfinal in Europe, and I think we may have been handed a lucky break getting the first leg at home, because I think our Europa League opponents have looked nervous. They've looked overawed. They've started games tentatively. And I believe that there's a chance that if we have the right application and energy, and if we are combative, if we confront them and really press them and have some good energy to start with, I think we can end this leg early. But obviously with Arsenal, you never know what attitude and approach they're going to take coming out. Are they going to be nervous? Are they going to be sort of lackadaisical, or are you going to have the right approach? We had the right approach against Milan in Milan, but I think CSKA having to come to the Emirates, I think it's a big opportunity. I mean, are you as encouraged about the possibility of this match, and how do you think he'll line up for it?
I don't really know enough about CSKA, to be quite honest, to kind of have a feel for how they might approach it and whether they might be nervous. They knocked Lyon out in the last round, so they're a serious team. We know that much, and we have to be really on our guard. And that means the home leg as well. I mean, everyone knows that we don't have this particularly great record in Russia, but we need to take care of the home game as well. So I because I know so little about them, I don't really have a feel for how likely any of that is. In terms of how he'll set up, I think that he started with Welbeck wide left because that's what he wants to do on Thursday. And I think he probably wants to start Lacazette up front. I don't know if anything that happened on Thursday, or if Welbeck did get a knock, whether that changes anything. So I maybe not. So I think, at the risk of trying to second guess Arsene any further, I think he'll go Welbeck wide left, Mkhitaryan on the right, Lacazette up front, and then kind of have Ozil in his usual number 10 spot. That might mean no place for Jack Wilshere, and also Wilshere played this game, and I know he's played quite a lot of football since Christmas, but he was willing to rest players basically for the Stoke game, and he was resting the likes of Koscielny. I mean, really, if you're looking after players, Wilshere is one of the ones you'd think he was going to look after if he was going to start, but then he seems to start Jack more often than not at the moment, so don't really know there. But yeah, I think you'll see Koscielny come back in. Monreal left back, Xhaka I think will come in for El Neni now, and so I think we'll see Welbeck wide left and Lacazette start up front.
That would be brilliant. Any score prediction for this one?
Yeesh. Yeah, I really don't know. I just don't know enough about the opposition. I'll say a narrow Arsenal win, maybe 1-0, 2-1, something like that. I don't get the sense that we're going to, put this out of sight. I don't think many teams put European quarterfinals out of sight. Once you get to this stage, you tend to be playing serious teams.
Okay, well, I will save the suspense of my prediction for last. But Paul, are you bullish? Are you nervous? What do you think?
Yeah, I'm bullish. Within our range of bullishness at the moment. We've come a cropper in Europe in all sorts of different ways over the years, and not always against Bayern and Barca recently. The Monaco game. So anything can happen.
What do you think we'll do in goal?
Unfortunately, I think we'll play Ospina.
So no shenanigans this week. You think that was just truly Czech was injured? No shenanigans there.
I would have thought Czech would be on the bench, but I don't know. I guess that doesn't go with the spiel. Yeah, okay. I see the shenanigans line. I don't think he'll do it. I wish he would. Because man, so much rides on it, and nothing like a good dose of ruthlessness to get the message through to everybody. We're really going for this. So, don't know. But,
all right.
Yeah, no, I think
that was a kind of hard-hitting, incisive, and comprehensive analysis I was looking for.
Elliot, go fuck yourself.
That's the most decisive thing he said in that segment. So I appreciate you adding.
Oh yeah, how about this? No,
yes.
Okay.
All right, fine. Clive, can you give us some kind of stamp on this one?
Yeah, I think according to the club, Czech is not fit. But I don't know if I dreamt that, but I'm sure I heard that. So it looks like Ospina will play. I wish Czech was fit, because it would show everybody that Arsenal are not. They actually don't care about their values for once. They actually care about winning the competition. So I hope that Czech gets his moment in competition when he is fit. I agree with Tim on the team selection. That is our strongest 11 for this competition. So let's play it. And let's not mess about. Jack played with a knee bandage yesterday. Looked like he was 75% fit. Did okay in a game where we had 70% possession, so there's no issues there. So, yeah, for me, if Welbeck's in shape, hopefully he plays and he can be that wrecking ball and we can have that running threat to at least threaten them and create spaces and targets for Ozil and Mkhitaryan to hit. If we have that, I think we'll be fine. 2 clear goals would be nice because in Russia, I think it's going to be tough. I think
it's funny because Lyon actually beat them 1-0 in Russia and then managed to lose 3-2 at home.
Yeah, exactly. So I was listening to Adrian Clark on the Arsenal podcast, and he was sort of saying that they're much better away than they are at home. But I think if we really do them at Arsenal on Thursday, I think away from home will be quite threatening, and we do look after the ball quite well. And in some ways, this team, for all its slowness and lack of directness and passing in non-hurtful areas, is sort of a European football style that we have. And I think it does look good in Europe. So I'm pretty positive.
Yeah, I mean, do you have a score prediction? Or do you just want to tell me to go fuck myself like Paul?
No, 2-0. 2-0 would be nice, but I'll be happy with 1-0, as long as it's nil.
See,
I'm feeling 2-0.
Yeah, I got to tell you, I think Danny Welbeck is much better suited to play with Lacazette than he is with Aubameyang, because I do think that Lacazette can come deeper, receive the ball, he can play some football, he can put Danny in behind. Danny's running can help clear spaces at the edge of the box for Lacazette, whereas his running just plugs up the space or congests the space that Aubameyang wants to run into. So I think this could really work. I hope the manager will give Lacazette the start. Yep.
Yeah. I'm just going to say, Danny's running is good, but let's play him the ball. Let's not shy away from forward passes, right? We do that a lot. So if we got him on the pitch...
You like seeing the ball wind up in Rosette?
Well, you know what? Sometimes you just got to turn people around.
Yeah.
You turn them around, and then you create the space on the next run. When you turn people around, they drop off. And what did Stoke do in the first half? They pressed us back, right? And all you had to do was just turn them around, and then they lose a bit of confidence, and they step back. So use Welbeck to turn them around, to create the space for our ball players, and they will be fine.
Yeah, I buy into that. Look, I think there's a big opportunity that's open for us here. I think that Ozil, Mkhitaryan, Lacazette, that's a lot of quality. Ramsey. I don't know that CSKA can live with that, and I wouldn't be surprised if we maybe make this a 4-1 or a 4-0. I genuinely think that's on the cards. Nobody would say that I'm a Pollyanna. I'm not renowned for being an optimist. I just see little signs of life, and I think that the quality that we're seeing with Mkhitaryan and Ozil and the chemistry they're building together, the way Lacazette played at the weekend, keeping Xhaka fresh, but I thought that he looked really influential when he came on. Again, I realize it's Stoke. It's the 19th place team in the Premier League. But look, CSKA are the third place team in Russia. They are a team that did get past Lyon, admittedly, but lost at home and conceded twice on their travels. It just so happens that they won that game 3-2. And I'm not trying to dismiss that, but I also... I think they're there to be had, and they have Akinfeev in goal, who I think is a little bit of a cartoon goalkeeper himself. So we could have quite the goalkeeping display out there between Ospina and Akinfeev. But I am feeling pretty optimistic, which sets me up for huge humiliation and despair on Thursday, which is kind of how football works. But I wouldn't be surprised if we end the tie on Thursday. And by end the tie, I mean win 4-0, and then of course lose 5-0 in Russia. But in any event, that's usually how it works. Unless anybody has anything else, we'll save it for then. Tim is on Twitter at Stilberto. Thanks, Tim.
My pleasure, as always.
Yes, I feel it was. And then Paul is on Twitter at go fuck yourself, but also pausing in my pants. Thanks, Paz.
Yeah, go fuck yourself, Elliot.
Same to you, buddy. And then Clive, did you want to share this news before we said goodbye? The big managerial news that's hitting the news wires as we record.
No, just reading about Allegri. He must have done a press conference pre-Champions League saying that when Juventus is done, he's going to be leaving the country, which is no doubt going to link him to Arsenal in every single newspaper tomorrow. So whether he's done this summer or next summer.
You are such a transfer media whore.
I'm sorry.
To be fair, he said it himself. Allegri did say, I'm definitely managing abroad when I'm done at Juventus.
Yeah, and I think he even broke into English when he said it.
Yeah.
So, damn. Because we speak English, like everybody at Arsenal.
So
it's
as far
2
as
+ 2.
It's a done deal. Right?
All right,
so,
good enough.
Let's look forward to it.
Clive is actually on Twitter at ClivePF. Thanks, Clive.
Thanks a lot.
Yeah, my name's Elliot Smith. You can block me on Twitter, Yankee Gunner. Give us a 5-star review and write nasty things about Paul. And then hopefully Scott will be back after the Europa League on Thursday, at which point we will break down the historic victory. In any event, I hope everybody's up for it. I certainly hope everybody shows up to the stadium, because it would be shocking and disgraceful if they did not. So we will talk to you after Arsenal 10, CSKA 0.